Voiceover production called mastering is the very last stage of voiceover processing, and it's all about the loudness of your voiceover recording. Now, depending on the project, it's not really always necessary, but it is used to meet loudness standards, and it can be used as a secret weapon to make superior demos and really outshine your competition during auditions. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. Let's make your voice sound better. What is mastering? Well, it's the final stage of voiceover production before you send out your file. The process of mastering allows you to raise the overall volume of your audio recording without peaking or distorting the file. It's also how we meet loudness requests from different platforms or different clients. So why is it valuable? Well, this is the biggest takeaway I want you to get from this. Louder is perceived as better when it comes to audio recordings. And here I'll show you. Let's say you've got two identical voiceover demos. Each clip is played on the same playback system at a comfortable volume. You play back each clip and they sound exactly the same. Now, if one of those audio files was louder than the other, and they're played back at the same volume on the same system, the louder clip will always be perceived as better. And here's why. It's because the human ear is not a linear device. At the lowest volumes, we're most sensitive to high-mid frequencies. The hearing curve actually changes with volume. The louder the audio becomes, our sensitivity difference between frequency becomes less. The curve actually flattens out. In other words, as things get louder, we hear different frequencies more evenly. This is why music sounds better and more full when it's louder. So let's take a closer look at mastering and how it works. I'm going to walk you through what a limiter does, a limiter plugin, so you get what the controls do and you understand what it is. There are tons of different limiters. Most DAWs actually have them as stock plugins. This is the L2 Ultra Maximizer by Waves. It's also a limiter. I'm not going to go too deep on this, just going to show you what you need to know to properly master a voiceover. Let's look at the threshold. As you lower the threshold, the output level goes up. On some limiters, this may also be called the gain. The threshold here is set to negative 10 dB, meaning we've pushed up the signal 10 dB. Now here's how this is working. The level of the file can be increased, but with minimal audible effect. The tone and all the work that you've done in the processing is actually retained. It doesn't change the sound, just the volume. The out ceiling here is where you place your limit. With this control, you're saying, I won't have any audio ever go over this setting. Although you raise the gain, the limiter actually caps the level at the ceiling. I do want to mention that I suggest you have the out ceiling at a slightly lower setting than what you see here or even around 0, and I'll explain why when we get into the example. The attenuation meter shows us how much attenuation is happening during playback. When you use a limiter on your processed file, you lower the threshold, which is raising the level. The peaks are limited above the out ceiling, which gives us the result. There is no way we could ever get near the increase in volume of this portion of the audio without a limiter. Normalizing can't accomplish this. Now, before I run you through a real-world example by mastering a voiceover, I need to get you familiar with a few things. Let's get to know the meter because we're going to need to measure your loudness. You'll find a meter in most of the DAWs, and most of them have the same type of measuring capabilities. All right, so let's talk about what we need to measure specifically. This is the Lean meter, and I think it's very user-friendly. It's free. There's a free and paid version for your DAW. It's compatible with both Mac and Windows. Lean is the name of the company, and I believe it's ulean.co. I'll have a link in the description. I'm using the Pro version here, and this meter works in most recording packages, recording software. You may have heard of an RMS meter, and that's the one here on the left. An RMS meter reads average levels over a short period of time. But the LUFS measurement is what we're concerned with. And LUFS is like an RMS meter, but the LUFS meter measures the average loudness over time, and it's adjusted for the human hearing differences, which are the differences in how we're sensitive to frequencies at different volumes. The short-term LUFS measures average loudness over a shorter length of time, and the Ulean short-term meter gives you a 3-second average of the loudness. The integrated LUFS continues measuring average loudness over time, and it updates the average value on an ongoing basis. This is the one we're going to be looking at. Now's probably a really good time to tell you not to freak out. If this is all totally foreign to you and you're like, LUFS and output ceiling, threshold, gain, negative, what's going on? Don't freak out, because you don't have to really understand all this stuff. You could still master your voiceover and raise the loudness by just following the directions. Don't freak out, just keep going. You may be familiar with a true peak meter. This is the one that is probably on your DAW. A true peak meter measures instantaneous levels. Then there's the loudness range we have to be concerned with. It's the difference between the highest and lowest true peak values. I know there's a lot there to digest, and there's a lot more, but for now, I just want to get you familiar with the lay of the land here. These are the things that take part and are part of the mastering process. As you can see here, I've listed a few of the standards. Loudness standards or loudness requirements are specific for different platforms. We've got Netflix. They want you to master your maximum integrated dialogue. If you've got dialogue in your TV show or you're doing voiceover at -27 LUFS. There's the Apple Podcast is different. YouTube's -14. I'm going to walk you through an example of mastering using the YouTube loudness standard. The blue is the male voiceover example on the top, and the yellow is a female example. We're going to start with the male example first. The two files here that we're looking at, the file on the left is unprocessed, and the one on the right is processed with a custom processing chain that I've put together for this voiceover talent. Let's listen to the two so you can hear the difference, and keep your eye on the level. You'll notice that the volume is about the same between the two.
In the North Sea, on the tiny island of Fedja, Norway, a German scientist tracks local rumors about a mysterious underwater wreckage. In the North Sea, on the tiny island of Fedja, Norway, a German scientist tracks local rumors about a mysterious underwater wreckage.
If you're a fan of the channel and you've been following some of my videos, I spend a lot of time and a lot of energy to make sure that the post-processing level is the same. So it's called gain staging, and what you want to do is make sure if you add an EQ or if you add a compressor that the level going in is the same as the level coming out of your processing chain. And we've done that here. And when you add a limiter to do some mastering and raise up that volume, which I'm going to show you right now, we work on the processed file. And the reason why I want to retain that same level is because I need that space to do some EQing. If I was going to do that in the mastering stage, sometimes it calls for a little light EQing. You've saved yourself some headroom, and that's exactly why we make sure that we get a good level in the very beginning of your recording process, is so you have room to work when you get to the mastering stage, which is what we're doing now. So if we switch on the limiter here, you'll notice that I have increased the threshold, or actually lowered the threshold, -8.8 decibels, which is increasing the loudness 8.8 decibels. And that's what I have figured it's going to take to get the integrated LUFS level to -14, which is the YouTube standard that we're searching for, or we're aiming for. The output ceiling is set to -1.5, and the reason why I do that, there's two things I want to point out here. I use -1.5 because even though we've set -1.5 as the ceiling, there are some instantaneous peaks that may sneak through. So the true peak level here on the meter, it may go above -1.5, and so we've left some headroom there. And the other reason is when you take a lossless file like a WAV file or an AIFF file, and you make like an MP3, you do data compression, you make a smaller file. What happens is in the process, when you go from a WAV to an MP3 file, you can actually end up having your level higher. And so we're going to leave some headroom for that too. I believe it's like 0.7 dB is the change that can happen when you go from a WAV like to an MP3, let's say. So I'm building that in as well as a buffer, because if I make this an MP3 file, I don't want it to go over 0. I don't want any distortion. I don't want any overs. So -1.5 as an output ceiling kind of keeps those two things in consideration and should keep us in the safe zone here. Also, when we play back this clip, take a look at the attenuation meter and you'll see it drop down 3 to 4, maybe 5 dB at the peaks, when we hit those peaks on the the audio clip, and that's when the limiter is really doing its job by attenuating those peaks and making sure that they stay under the output ceiling. They don't go over. Okay, we'll play back the file now with the limiter engaged and see if we could hit that -14 LUFS target.
In the North Sea on the tiny island of Fedja, Norway, a German scientist tracks local rumors about a mysterious underwater wreckage. Wolfgang Lowenstein is intrigued by the story of the UH-64 that disappeared in February 1945.
So we've hit the -14 LUFS right on target there. You'll see the true peak max has gone to -0.7 dB, which means there are some instantaneous peaks in here that snuck through the out ceiling, and that does happen from time to time, but I still have the necessary 0.7 dB of headroom. So if we were to make an MP3 file from this after we're done mastering, it shouldn't go over. So again, that's the reason we make sure the out ceiling, when it comes to voiceover, is a little bit lower than what you'd expect, maybe 0 or 0.5 or something. Okay, now let's take a look at the female voiceover here. I've got the unprocessed file on the left side and the processed file on the right. Again, notice that the levels are very, very similar. I did that on purpose. And let's hear the difference between the two.
Localizadas no meio do Oceano Índico, as Ilhas Maldivas são um verdadeiro paraíso na Terra. Localizadas no meio do Oceano Índico, as Ilhas Maldivas são um verdadeiro paraíso na Terra.
The processed file has a better balance between frequencies. The boxy sound is removed, and we've also tamed some of those dynamic peaks with a little bit of compression, but we've still ended up with the very similar volume after the custom processing chain was applied to this female voiceover. All right, let's do the same thing. We are looking to hit -14 LUFS, the YouTube loudness standard, and I have had to lower the threshold -11.4, which is raising the gain 11.4 decibels. Same -1.5 output ceiling, and you could take a look at the attenuation meter when we play back the processed file, and let's see if we can get this integrated LUFS to -14.
Localizadas no meio do Oceano Índico, as Ilhas Maldivas são um verdadeiro paraíso na Terra. As suas praias de areia branca, águas de cor turquesa e sol tropical são um destino inesquecível. Se a sua paixão são os esportes aquáticos como mergulho e snorkel, este é o seu destino. A biodiversidade nesse arquipélago é incrível. Devido à sua oferta hoteleira, as Maldivas têm uma grande variedade de opções de acomodação. Seja um hotel 5 estrelas com todos os luxos e uma charmosa cabana ou em um bangalô sobre a água, você com certeza encontrará o melhor.
Now, the longer you play the clip, you'll see that the integrated LUFS numbers, they stop changing as much because it's a rolling average, so it gets more precise as it goes. If I was going to make an MP3, I'd probably change and do it one more time, but we're pretty close here. And as you can see, we've hit the YouTube loudness target. Now, we're able to get the increased loudness, but the tone and the dynamics are retained. You'll notice that before the limiter, the loudness range is very, very similar to the loudness range after the limiter, which is exactly what we want. It's a little ironic that you can't really hear the exact work I've done here because all of these before and after processing files, they had to be mastered to YouTube's loudness standards, but you can see the result in the meters. I've posted the unprocessed, processed, and mastered files for you to hear, and there's a link in the description to check it out. LennyB.com is my website. There you can find voiceover training courses, there's free tips and techniques, and you can get all the details on my custom processing service. There's a simple form with all the instructions for how I need to receive your voiceover file when you send me one. Visit lennyb.com and look for the red button at the top of the page, or you can get there from the link in the description. When you know that you have a great voiceover sound, your performance is better, and I think that confidence is magnetic, especially to the potential clients and the ones listening to your voiceover. That's what I offer to my voiceover clients. It's confidence, really. I love your comments and questions, and I appreciate when you subscribe to the channel. So if your voiceover sound doesn't inspire you and you're constantly thinking, is my voice good enough? Is it as good as it needs to be? Then let's make your voice sound better. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. Thanks for watching.